I know plenty of bodybuilders who they have a prescription, of course, because that's the only reason you should be taking this is if your doctor has approved it and is giving you a prescription for it. What's up, guys? Derek, moreplates.moredates.com. Today we're going to be talking briefly about how to maximize vascularity. So how do you get, your bicep vein to show up? How do you get the veins to come to the surface? How do you, get that like paper thin skin look? I'm going to detail more or less the basics of what you need to know. It's not overly complicated, even though everyone seems to think there's some sort of secret. The reality is, one, body fat. Obviously, you need to be low body fat. The lower your body fat is, the closer to the surface and visible your veins are going to be, because there isn't a layer of fat shrouding them. I think that's, pretty obvious. But as far as another thing, hair. A lot of people don't seem to realize how much of a difference body hair has. So if you've never shaved your body or nared before, like a lot of people think, oh, it's not manly because it's, only girls do that. It's like if you're a bodybuilder or you're, interested in bodybuilding in general, I think you should probably get out of your head by now that getting rid of your body hair is not like something that should be frowned upon. It's pretty common. And the difference between having a hairy physique and having a hairless physique in terms of visible muscle detail and vascularity, it's like losing 3% body fat in 2 seconds just by removing the hair. So if you've never nared before or never shaved or never, waxed or whatever your method is of hair removal, I highly recommend you try it if you're trying to get as lean as possible, because it makes a huge difference. A lot of people are shocked what they actually look like under this carpet that they have on their body. So getting rid of the hair, that's super important too. And it's actually, an easy and free way to get a lot leaner looking very instantly. In addition to that, gaining muscle obviously goes without saying. The more muscle you gain, the, more you're going to be pushing the veins to the surface essentially and getting that vascular look. And obviously this comes in conjunction with the low body fat, of course, but it is definitely, the more muscle I've gained over the years, the more apparent I've seen, my veins look when I'm just walking around, even without trying, versus when I first started bodybuilding. Even though I was a rail and super lean, I had no visible veins whatsoever. So big, the more muscle you gain, the more vascular you're going to be, essentially. So obviously there's a genetic component too in terms of your literal vasculature. But in addition to that, hitting your electrolyte intake. A lot of people don't realize, especially sodium in particular. So many guys, especially people who lift, don't realize how little of sodium they're getting. They think restricting sodium is what's going to get them, leaner looking. But oftentimes the restricting the sodium is actually one of the biggest issues with guys being flat and not getting a good pump and not being very vascular. And there's a reason why, there's bodybuilders backstage before shows who, they pound sodium dense meals, because it brings the veins to the surface and it creates that kind of, assuming all your hydration electrolytes are all in check, having an adequate amount of sodium is critical for having muscle fullness and vascularity. So make sure you're getting your sodium in, because a lot of people totally overlook it and think the opposite of what it is. They think that it's bad for you and they avoid it like the plague, when in reality, you're probably not having enough of it. So that's another thing. In addition to that, water, obviously, it goes back to the electrolyte thing, hydration. If you have flat, water-depleted muscle bellies, you're not going to be pushing the veins to the surface of the skin. You're not going to be getting that vascular full look. So having enough water, having enough glycogen as well, also comes to the fullness, pushing the veins to the top of the skin, having that full, rounder, more vascular look, critical for vascularity. That's why when you are flat and glycogen depleted, you are not very vascular. You might, look very lean, but you're not going to be as full and vascular as you would be if you were glycogen loaded. And that's why guys do that carb deplete peak week and then they, load back up on carbs before the show. Circulation. This is another thing that is mediated via nitric oxide, and there are supplements on the market that do increase nitric oxide to some extent, and some much better than others. The most efficacious one, in my opinion, is L-Citrulline, and it creates awesome vasodilation. It's definitely one of the few kind of like pump ingredients that's really worth adding into your, pre-workout if you do want to take that kind of stuff. And as far as something you should know about L-Citrulline too is a lot of these companies, I'm sure you've seen, there's L-Citrulline, and there's citrulline malate. So the difference and the problem with most companies is they use citrulline malate as a cheaper way to kind of deceive customers. So citrulline malate is composed of 50% malic acid. So authentic citrulline malate is produced by chemically bonding free-form L-citrulline to DL-malic acid. So the result is a entirely different compound with unique properties. But the problem with the common citrulline malate on the supplement market today is it doesn't have this chemical reaction. It's just citrulline mixed with malic acid in like a big mixing vat, essentially, in the manufacturing facility, and there is no chemical bond. It's just the two ingredients being mixed together in a cheap blend, and it's sold as citrulline malate, but in reality it's just citrulline plus malic acid. And then the dose of the citrulline malate on the bottle, you might see 6 grams, but in reality it's just 3 grams of L-citrulline and 3 grams of malic acid. So you're not really getting what you're paying for often, despite it being like, it's kind of like a cheap trick to some extent. And most of the time, if somebody wasn't like looking into this stuff, they would have no idea. So it depends on the standardization and the ratio used, but a pretty standard format could be like citrulline malate 2-to-1 ratio, and then you're getting like only 4 grams of L-citrulline and then 2 grams malic acid or something like that. But then the label claims 6 grams of citrulline malate. And when in fact, you're being led to believe you're getting something that you're not, essentially. So L-citrulline is the main component you're really trying to get out of this. Obviously, malic acid can have its own benefits, but L-citrulline is the main component here you're trying to get to boost your nitric oxide, and the maximum effective dose of L-citrulline is 10 grams per day. So you'll often see pre-workouts with a high dose of citrulline malate, might be like 6 grams, and then on the very high end, maybe like 8 grams. And then in reality, how much L-citrulline are you actually getting out of that? Maybe like 4 grams, maybe 5, maybe 6 at most. But I have yet to see a product actually hit the L-citrulline requirement, or I wouldn't say requirement, but like what I would consider a top end efficacious dose. And this is where I see a hole in the supplement market where it's expensive. This is the thing too. There's margins in the supplement industry where you only have, it's expensive to make a product. It's not necessarily always about the companies being cheap. A lot of it is, despite the citrulline malate kind of thing being a bit deceiving in my opinion, a lot of it is the cost to manufacture the product, the marketing costs, credit card processors, sponsoring athletes, doing this, doing that. It all costs money. At the end of the day, there has to be a margin for these companies to even be worth private labeling a product and making a formula and putting it on the market for sale to begin with. So it's very unlikely that it's going to be within a company's margins to have the max out top end dose of L-citrulline in their product, unless they're selling like a flat out L-citrulline product. And in most cases, that would just be a bag of raw powder and it wouldn't even have like a specified dose on it. So, and even then, they probably wouldn't tell you to use 10 grams. So I'm not saying to use 10 grams, but I do see a kind of like a hole in the industry where this could be filled by a pre-workout that actually, goes on the top end. And that's actually what I'm going to be doing with Gorilla Mode. I am going to release the formula soon. And by the time this video's out, it might be already in, ready to go. But anyways, it's going to have a ridiculously high dose of L-citrulline, and it's going to be legitimate L-citrulline, not some citrulline malate mixed in a vat and then, claimed to be 9 grams or something, or 10 grams when it's not, because L-citrulline is L-citrulline. You're trying to get L-citrulline. So I think an efficacious dose of L-citrulline is like minimum. I would take, perhaps 6 grams would be a very good dose for most companies is what they put in it. 8 to 10 is like a top end max out dose where you would get the maximum benefit, and the 10 gram dose in clinical data being the maximum effective one. Probably not overly necessary, but if that's where you want to know where the kind of top end data lies, that's what is stated in the clinical data that I've seen. 10 grams being the max efficacious dose. So as far as other things, Cialis, something commonly overlooked because it's thought to just be a ED medication, which it is. And if you don't have a legitimate prescription for Cialis, then you should not, take what I'm about to say as advice whatsoever. As in fact, even if it is a prescription, you should not take what I'm about to say as advice. I'm just going to tell you straight up what it does and what kind of effect it has on vasodilation. So it's a PDE5 inhibitor and acts as a potent vasodilator, and it allows for greater ease in achieving and sustaining an erection. So you probably may or may not already know this. It improves the circulation and blood flow to your Johnson. That's how it works. But it also is a potent vasodilator in general, not just to your Johnson, but in general. So I'm sure you may have or may not have heard of bodybuilders taking PDE5 inhibitors pre-workout, but the fact of the matter is they're extremely effective at getting a ridiculous pump. So something like L-Citrulline in conjunction with your prescription, if you are prescribed Cialis to begin with, extremely effective, like ridiculous pumps. And the vascularity you can get from that is second to none, in my opinion. And I know plenty of bodybuilders who they have a prescription, of course, because that's the only reason you should be taking this is if your doctor has approved it and has given you a prescription for it, So but they're using it at a small dose every day for the blood pressure lowering effects, because it does, in fact, help regulate your blood pressure to some extent. It's a potent vasodilator, and it's commonly, prescribed in either, a big dose to be used for pre-sex kind of thing, but as well as on a daily basis at a micro dose. And this is where some people, if you have a prescription and you do already happen to be using it every day, throwing L-citrulline on top of that is one of the best combinations, in my opinion, for vasodilation, crazy vascularity, and pumps. So anyways, that's kind of the end of my video. So take from that what you will. That's some of the stuff I've seen to be the most effective. Don't take any of that as direct advice of what to do. Obviously, listen to your physician and listen to what they say, not people on YouTube. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe. Check out my blog, moreplatesmoredates.com. Check me out on Instagram at moreplates_moredates, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, etc. Check out the podcast link, video description below. Drop a 5-star rating if you don't mind. It helps the algorithm out, I believe. So much appreciated when you guys do that. Talk to you guys soon.